Okay, here we are back at my scale model of the sarcophagus, and now we're going to demonstrate how this stain on the sarcophagus can match up with what is on the left side and right side of the Shroud of Turin. So to get these stains to match up, first we would fold across the center, and then now the stain that is on the right side is matching up with what's underneath that was on the left. And then the next thing to do would be to fold the shroud under like this. And when you fold it under, now you'll see that that stain is underneath here will match up with the stain on the leg. And that is how that fold would work.
Point number 13. Notch matches. Here we have a sort of notch where this diamond stain is coming to a point. What is underneath? Turning the shroud layer on and off, you can see that there is a notch in the sarcophagus cloak right at that spot. I will also zoom in closer. Now we're looking over here. Turning this on and off, you can see that this notch mark corresponds to a notch on the sarcophagus underneath it. Point number 14. One of the largest stains on the shroud corresponds to a deep fold on the sarcophagus. If you look over here, especially to the right, because the left being a mirror of the right, I will turn the shroud layer on and off, and you can see that we have a correspondence between that dark stain and a deep groove in the sarcophagus right at that point. So I'll turn that layer on and off, and that is a match. That seems that whatever liquid they used had pooled inside this deep groove and may have caused this stain above. Point number 15. Drip's shape on shroud looks like it ran into fold. I'm speaking here about the trail of this drip. You'll notice that it seems to go around a hump, then down, and then suddenly straight down into something. Why is that? When we turn the layer on and off, you will see it corresponds to a rounded fold in the cloak and a deep groove right next to that. So you can imagine how that drip flowed around the cloak, then down and into that groove. I'll turn the layer on and off so that you can see how that corresponds. Point number 16. Stain on sarcophagus corresponds to arm drip. If you follow my arrows upward here to the left, you'll see that this stain on the arm ends with a large drip and a smaller drip. And when we turn the shroud layer on and off, you'll see that there seems to be here a wide drip, and then it runs down like a stream and pools and goes off of the sarcophagus. I think that these items may be related here, that we had a wet shroud where this stain came down and then dripped onto the sarcophagus here and then ran off. So they're similar in size between this mark here and this mark here. So that's point number 16. Point number 17. Crown of thorns wishbone shape on shroud matches wishbone groove on sarcophagus. This one may be a little bit more difficult to see, but I'm speaking about this wishbone shape here on Jesus' head. When I turn the layer on and off, you should be able to see that it's actually just grooves of the beard that are running down. We have them, they're kind of faint here, but there is a wishbone shape of grooves that are coming right down in this direction. So what was supposedly drips of blood from the crown of thorns is actually just a tracing of the beard of the sarcophagus. Okay, point number 18 and point number 19 we're going to do together since they are so closely related. Point number 18, folds, fit, cloak, grooves. If you look here up on the right, you'll see this line coming down where the arrows are pointing. When I turn off the shroud, you'll see that we are still aligned with a groove in the cloak. And now looking to the left, where my arrows are pointing, we have a thick line and a thin line right here. So turning off the shroud, we have a thick line on the cloak and a thin line on the cloak of the sarcophagus. So I'll turn it on a few times. You can see how that is a match. Now these stains mirror each other so well on left and right. I have the feeling that this occurred on the left when the shroud was folded, and then once it was opened up it's just mirrored on the right. And that also pertains to point number 19, which I'll do next. End of cloak shape matches. So you look here how it's kind of rounded on the end, and we have kind of an end piece. So when I turn off the shroud, we see what's there. We're kind of rounded and we have an end piece, but even more so on the left side, you can see how this is a nice rounded shape with an end piece, which really matches with the stain in appearance. Okay, point number 20 and point number 21 we're going to do together. Stain and line match notch below hand. This arrow is pointing to a fold right here, which is right at the spot where a stain is. The other two arrows are pointing to this stain. I'll zoom in a little bit closer. It's dark at the top and gets amorphous around the sides and kind of comes up around to the left as well. When I turn the shroud layer on and off, you'll see how that corresponds to a notch where the hands come together, and perhaps even to the broken spot and the stain that is on the sarcophagus hand itself. Moving on now to point number 21. I'll zoom out and then back in again, and you'll see line on shroud matches sarcophagus line. That's this line here, and when I turn the shroud layer on and off, you will see that there is definitely a line on the sarcophagus that was formed perhaps by a stain, and maybe this had something to do with alignment. Who knows? I just thought I'd point it out. Point number 22. Blotches slightly above on shroud match sarcophagus. May indicate shroud move. If you'll look over here to the right, I've drawn a letter C with an angled line, and the same thing below it. What I believe I see is a pattern repeated on the shroud and the sarcophagus, which is a stain inside this letter C and an angled stain line to the right of this angled line. And when I turn the shroud on and off, if you'll look to this area, I believe I have the same pattern. There is an angled stain here and a dark stain on the sarcophagus as well. So perhaps that is an indication that the shroud moved. We now flip the shroud over and align the hand as best as we can. Once we do this, I will call out point number 23, which is that the arm angle matches perfectly. As I turn the layer on and off, you will see that the angle of the arms on the shroud match extremely well to the sarcophagus underneath it, even where it gets sort of wider on this left side here. It is happening on the shroud as well. Point number 24. Square shape of shroud hand matches square back of hand on sarcophagus. Looking at the hand here on the sarcophagus, notice the squarish shape and especially this angle at the top here. Don't worry about the fingers in either of these hands or the fingers on the shroud. Just look at that shape right now. And as I turn the layer on and off, you will see that we have a really perfect match between those shapes and even that angled shape on top of the hand. Point number 25. Blank spot on shroud matches broken hand on sarcophagus. To the left of this squarish top hand, we have a large blank area. When I turn the shroud layer on and off, you can see what that corresponds to on the sarcophagus. There is the broken hand of the actual sarcophagus that they would not have wanted to imprint onto the shroud. So this was intentionally left blank. Point number 26. Fold marks indicate rechecking and movement of hand forgery. Notice that there is a strong fold mark underneath the hands, right about here, and there's an angled fold mark above the hands right here. This would be consistent with someone who was trying to forge the hand and was constantly rechecking the positioning. Point number 27. Shroud likely slid down for 4 fingers that match. I have an A and a B listed here, and in circle A is the squarish top back of the hand, and in the B area is where the fingers are on the actual sarcophagus. I realize that they probably then took this shroud and at an angle slid it down to create the fingers. And that will be our point number 28. Point number 28. Fingers match if shroud is rotated 30 degrees. I went ahead and rotated this shroud 30 degrees clockwise and matched up the hand to the fingers. When I did this, some exciting things happened. First of all, the fingers match up very well to the sarcophagus and the shroud. And now that you see that, I'll show you some other very exciting things in future points. Point 29. When rotated 30 degrees for fingers, this stain and its angle match cloak groove. I have circled this large stain here, and the angle that it's at matches up so perfectly with the cloak underneath it. I was quite surprised at that finding when we were rotated 30 degrees for the fingers. But turning the layer on and off, you can see that that matches up so well. It appears to be a planned element of the design. It even ends up here right in this spot where this groove gets closer to the cloak. So I find that to be a perfect match there between the angle and the stain. Question: was shroud rotated again to reuse same sarcophagus hand? I noticed that with the second hand of the shroud, it didn't quite match what was on the sarcophagus because the sarcophagus hand is broken. So I thought it might be plausible that they then rotated the shroud again to reuse the fingers of that same first hand. And I was right about that. So let's head on out to my model to give a further demonstration.
Okay, here we are out at my model talking about the rotation for the hand. We already discussed the 30-degree rotation for the top hand, and I had speculated that perhaps from the vertical there was a 90-degree rotation counterclockwise to pick up the details for the second hand. And sure enough, I was right that this does match between the sarcophagus and the second hand as well. And it is further confirmed by the tassel mark underneath here, which will be much more apparent in the Photoshop file. So that is the 90-degree rotation counterclockwise for the second hand.